Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. So I frequently get the question, Richard, what do you feed to your shrimp? And in this video, I'm going to share with you the 6 things I feed to my shrimp most often. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Richard and I'm a shrimp keeper based in the UK. So let's start with what is probably my favourite food to feed to my shrimp, and that is frozen bloodworms. There is no doubt in my mind, and certainly in my experience, when it comes to keeping and particularly to breeding shrimp, bloodworms play a key role. When my wife and I used to breed shrimp commercially, we fed our shrimp tons and tons of frozen bloodworms. We certainly found that the more bloodworm we fed to our shrimp, the more babies that colony produced. Now, in our experience, it was down to the protein that the female needed to produce all of the eggs. Bloodworms are really high in protein, and that makes a difference. Now, yes, you can also buy bloodworms live and you can buy them freeze-dried, but in our experience, we tried live bloodworms and the shrimp seemed more to shy away from them. Let's be honest, they don't have the apparatus to actually make the kill. They're not natural predators. And we also found with freeze-dried bloodworms, they tend to float on the surface. And again, yes, you can rehydrate them by putting the cube in water and squeezing it and such likes. In our experience, frozen bloodworms were by far the best way to feed our shrimp bloodworm. Now, the next food I feed my shrimp an awful lot is a small pellet, and essentially, it doesn't matter too much which pellet you feed. I at the moment feed a lot of Tetra Prima, and I also feed Tetra Color Crisps, both of which are fast sinking, which is where the shrimp want them, hold together well in the water. They don't instantly disintegrate the minute they get wet, and they seem to be relished by the shrimp. Certainly in my experience, the shrimp are quick to hunt down the pellets or the crisps, and they smother them. They eat them really quickly. And the good thing is, when you're feeding a pellet or a crisp, you can just put a small pinch in. If you've only got 5 or 6 shrimp in a tank, you only want to put perhaps 2 or 3 or 4 pellets in, 2 or 3 or 4 crisps in. Let them sink down, let the shrimp eat them, and then perhaps the next day or later that day, depending on your feeding regime, you can put another 2 or 3 pellets in. It's really easy to control how much food you're feeding your shrimp if you feed them a pellet or a granular food, especially something like the Tetra Crisps. I can't recommend them enough. Now, the third food I love to feed to my shrimp are algae wafers. Now, algae wafers are one of those foods on the market that very much come in different qualities. You can get good quality algae wafers that have a high algae content, and you can get very cheap, very poor algae wafers that just disintegrate the minute they hit the water. Now, I personally like to feed my shrimp Hikari algae wafers. I've always found Hikari wafers to be pretty good quality, to hold up well in the water, and certainly the shrimp are quick to be all over them. So whilst there are many different algae wafers on the market, for me personally, it's Hikari algae wafers. I've fed them for many years and I've had great success. Now, at this moment, I should point out that in my book, the Neocaridina Shrimp Handbook, I do go into some detail about what I feed my shrimp, how much I feed my shrimp, and how often I feed the shrimp. And in the description below, I'll put a link that will give you 50% off the normal price. So the fourth food I like to feed to my shrimp are leaves. Now, that can be nettle leaves, it can be spinach leaves, it can be dandelion leaves. There are many different leaves we can feed to our shrimp. But typically, the process is the same. You source some fresh leaves, either from the store or from your local environment if you can go out and pick them. You then blanch the leaves in boiling water for a couple of minutes before allowing them to cool slightly and adding them to your shrimp tank. Now, I try and feed my shrimp nettles or spinach 2 or 3 times a month. I find I put the leaves in and the shrimp are all over it. And certainly with these tanks here, within 24 or 48 hours, the entire leaf has gone. Now, the great thing is, by adding fresh leaves, we bring in different nutrients, we bring in different vitamins and minerals that the shrimp may not be getting from our dry prepared foods. But we're also adding a food that holds up well in the water. Certainly in my experience, a stinging nettle leaf, a spinach leaf, whatever it might be, that will stay in the water for 48 hours, 72 hours easily before it starts to really decay and break down, and you'd have to remove it. You're never going to find a prepared food, a pellet, an algae wafer, whatever, that will sit in the water for 48 hours without breaking down. And that does mean if you put in a little bit too much, perhaps it's your first time feeding nettle leaves and you put in 3 leaves, and that's far more than your shrimp will eat, it doesn't really matter. Because after 48 hours, if the leaves haven't been consumed, just remove them and add some more. If you were to do something like that, if you were to chuck a whole fistful of algae wafers in and you've only got 6 shrimp, those algae wafers would quickly rot and just destroy your water quality. So feeding your shrimp fresh leaves not only brings in nutrients they're perhaps not getting from their food, but it also means you can be a bit more relaxed when it comes to feeding your shrimp. You don't have to be so precise with the amount of food you're putting in. Now, food number 5 for me is one of my favorites, and it's something I've been feeding my shrimp for several years now, and that's Repashy gel food. Now, Repashy gel food, there's 2 downsides. 1, it does tend to be fairly expensive, and 2, you have to make it up. You take a quantity of the powder, you add it to boiling water, you stir it well, and then you leave it to set before you cut it into cubes and keep it either in the fridge or in the freezer. Now, yes, on the face of it, that is a bit of a hassle. That is more work than unscrewing the lid, putting some pellets in, and closing the lid back up. But Repashy gel food brings so many advantages to your tank. First of all, much like the leaves I was talking about earlier, Repashy gel food holds up in the water for easily 24 hours, and I've often had it in there for longer. You can place a single cube into your shrimp tank. The shrimp will swarm all over it. They will go to chow town on it, trying to consume it. But the food will hold up. It won't start to disintegrate. It won't break down. And I've had cubes of Repashy in my tanks for 48 hours or more before I've removed them. You simply leave the cube in until the shrimp are done or until they've consumed it all. And then if necessary, you remove it. Not only does Repashy come in a variety of different blends, different flavors for want of a better word, you can prepare as much or as little as you need. If you have a single shrimp tank, you might only make up a small batch, cut it into cubes, keep it in the fridge. If you've got an entire fish room or shrimp room with 20, 30, 40 tanks, you just make a bigger batch. You cut it up into cubes, drop 1 in each tank. Yes, on the face of it, Repashy is expensive, but I don't think I could ever be without it. And food number 6 that I've been feeding to my shrimp recently is just good old crushed up flake food. Now, I learned the following trick in my podcast interview with Mark from Mark Shrimp Tanks. And that is essentially to take a pinch of fish food, crush it between finger and thumb, and sprinkle it into the shrimp tank so it spreads completely through the water column. And what that means is, the reason that's working so well for me at the moment, is that means wherever the baby shrimp are, they will have access to food. Now, baby shrimp, when the mother kicks them out, when they're released from the egg, they tend to remain very static for the first 1 to 2 weeks. And if those baby shrimp are kicked out by the mother and land somewhere where there isn't much food, they do typically starve out before they're big enough to move around the tank and source their own food. By adding crushed up flake, by sprinkling that through the water column, that crushed flake ends up landing absolutely everywhere. So no matter where the babies are, they will have access to food. Now, I made an entire video about this, discussing the techniques and sharing the results I've been having by using the crushed flake method. And you can watch that video next. Thanks for watching.